You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. For this episode, I got to speak with Amy Spies. Amy is a writer from a family of writers with a long and delicious Hollywood history. She wrote on 90210 and Melrose Place, among other things. So basically, she shaped my perception of the world. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, the merchandise. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbay, and now on Spotify and YouTube. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever it is that you listen. And I want you to know I've refreshed the store, and there are some very cool new products available, including a book for women who are pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant while holding down a job. It's called You'll Never Have a Baby in This Job Again, and it's about navigating pregnancy and childbirth discrimination in corporations. We talked to about 100 women who had babies while working and heard all the stories. We compared their stories to the laws in place, or not in place, and came up with the tools you need to protect yourself and have a successful pregnancy, maternity leave, and re-entry with your job. Also, there are some t-shirts you will want to pick up before the Women's March. And since podcasting thrives by word of mouth, please tell all your friends about the show. Okay, here is Amy Spies.
What do you do?
I'm a writer. And I've been a writer ever since I was a little girl. Both my parents were writers.
What kind of writers?
My mom was a magazine editor, and then she hired my father to do an article, and she had published short stories. And then working together, they became radio writers, and then they became early TV, golden age of TV writers like Playhouse 90 and Climax TV. And I found out recently, because my mother's Google IMDb keeps growing. I didn't know all the stuff she did. She did some TV show for Hitchcock, and
oh my gosh.
And so they moved. Desi and Lucy brought us out when I was 3.
Where were you before?
I was born in New York, but we lived in Westport, Connecticut, and they not for I Love Lucy, but for the Desilu Playhouse. I wish I remembered more of those years, but I was really young. I mean, I was younger than 3 when they first brought us out. I was like very young. And then my dad did a bunch of, like Playhouse 90 type stuff, but it was called Desilu Playhouse. And they did some movies. He worked on TV, a lot. TV shows forever, ever. He wrote one of the first season of Star Trek. He wrote one of them called Miri.
Oh my God. I just feel like I discovered a little treasure.
And so I had no idea growing up that this was a big deal because I grew up here.
Right, so this is just what people do. You just write for television.
Yeah, but a lot of people's parents did it, And
your mom worked your whole life.
My mom worked, although I always had a thing about it because she did get credit, but not really. Often it would be his name, but she worked on everything. Most of it was her idea. She typed everything, which meant she edited and rewrote everything.
Yeah.
And they discussed everything, and occasionally she would get credit. So I went through a big stage of, like, Zelda Fitzgerald really was the force behind,
right.
when I was...
You got to be mad about it for a while.
Yeah, I was mad about it for a while, but anyway,
and rightfully so.
Yes. And, once she died very sadly, of lung cancer when she was 57, and my dad was never really able to write after that.
Because he was sad, or because so much of it was her?
Because so much of it was her.
Yeah.
It really was a team. And,
wow.
Yeah. She didn't really have a personality to push for credit, honestly.
And at the time, I imagine that would have been a big battle.
Probably. And I always wondered, how did she get the credit she got? What was the dynamic that happened there? Because he had a name he used when he didn't want his name on something.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that. Yeah.
Oh, I wish we could ask her.
I know.
So you grew up in it.
In a sense, yes. My parents, most of their friends were in the film business, and writers or directors or producers or...
So did you just assume I'll do that too?
No, I never wanted to be a writer. I said, I wrote as a little girl just poetry and stories, and I said, I'll never... In high school, I said, I'm not going to be a writer because it's a terrible feast or famine life. Because I saw it as... oh yeah, but when's your next job? Because my father, they were free, and my mom too were freelance,
Right.
nothing. I mean, my mother also did things like she was a writer on the first year of Hollywood Squares because somebody asked her to do it. So she
Yeah.
wrote the questions, and so it was fun to help with that. And
But you're thinking I should just go be an accountant or something and have a steady job?
no, I really didn't think I liked film, but I went to college back east, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I liked history, and I liked literature, and I went to sort of one of these schools where during a period of time where the elitism annoyed me. So I got into an honors department, and I got out of it and did psychology, and then I just started doing film at school. And so I made a couple documentaries. I thought I would do documentaries. I loved doing sort of documentaries about socially relevant issues.
Yeah, like what did you do?
I did one on, well, it was sort of ended up being a group one on a halfway house and old age home, and it won awards, halfway house, old age home, and an autistic school, school for autistic children. And so it was combining all that. And then I got a traveling fellowship after college. Part of the fellowship was that you weren't allowed to really study, although I did study. So I did my thesis on Gertrude Stein. So I sort of followed her trail through Europe, so Paris for a lot of it. And then, southern France and Italy, and I went all over.
Yeah, that sounds
terrible. Yeah, it was
very
it was
bad.
really painful. and then I volunteered at the Women's Film Festival in New York, and met people I'm still friends with. And
Were you living in New York City at this point?
I went back and stopped in New York City. My sister lives in New York City, and so I stayed with her, and I just was there for months. And then I came back to visit my boyfriend in San Francisco and called the PBS station there while I was there on my way home to see my parents who I hadn't seen in a year. And I said, is there anything? And they said, yeah, there's a job. It's a national daily TV show, magazine-style show for older adults. Come on in. And so it's helping develop it. So I got the job with two other women, one of whom I'm close with two of them still to this day. And it was writing, directing, doing little documentaries, and it was great. It was great.
Sounds great. What was the show?
It was called Over Easy. It won awards. And it was sort of like, when you'd get guests on, and I interviewed Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, or I interviewed Sam and Betty Jaffe or Rosemary Clooney. I'm trying to think of, I did the wine, like a family, the Sebastiani family. I did displaced homemakers. And then you would get experts on all these issues like gerontology and things. It was a great job.
Yeah, the way you're talking about it, it sounds just so casual. You just called him up and you got this job producing a TV show.
You know what? It's like beginner's luck. And I also realized I really like starting things. Also, I had gone to Harvard, and I think that I had done Harvard, I'd done film, my family was in the film. I don't know. I just think it kind of clicked.
You had all the credentials.
I'd done something on older people at college, a documentary. It just was a good timing.
Yeah.
I was really lucky timing.
And you said that phrase, displaced homemakers. I haven't heard that
Well,
since
it was this group.
the 80s.
Yeah. It was a group up
thing.
there, and I found them. I wanted to do something socially relevant, So anyway, after my mom died, I started reading scripts, and this was a cold email, not emails, pre-emails, a cold call for Coppola in San Francisco, because that was when he had a production company, was just starting to do a studio, and the woman who ran the company, Melissa Gold, hired me to read scripts. So I said, oh, that's fun. I'll read scripts. So I read a bunch of scripts and books, and then someone in L.A., Lucy Fisher, got hired in L.A. to run Desilu Studios, and so I read stuff for her, and she liked how I read scripts. So she had offered me more work, and we became sort of friends. And then I thought I want a job, and I got a job working for like a woman who was doing socially relevant TV movies and TV shows.
You got a job as what with her?
It was doing I was a development person. I wasn't writing then because, what I decided first is I would not write. I would do documentaries, and I would do socially relevant. And then by doing all that, I thought, oh my God, I'm manipulating everything. I might as well manipulate. It's like I'm basically almost, it's just such a manipulative thing doing these kinds of documentaries, particularly because you had to have a script in advance for PBS. And then the girlfriend I got hired with for the PBS job wanted to write a screenplay. So I wrote one with her, and I said, I'll write one with you, but I don't want to do Hollywood. And so we wrote it, and then we had meetings. And anyway, from it, I ended up getting in here doing this stuff. And then I had the job for the woman. I got offered a job from that, a director of development for ABC TV, which I unbelievably, not wisely, turned down because I'm overly loyal, and I just felt weird leaving. It's my own thing. So. And I also wasn't sure I wanted that at that point. I was so ambivalent about it. And
was the job with the woman still good?
It was okay, but it wasn't really. It was okay job, but I mean, it was just not as real of a job. I just wasn't sure I wanted to suddenly go be I had never seen myself in this track of doing that. So I wasn't really.
You're like so reluctant about getting in. Of course, you turned down the studio job.
I turned down the studio job.
You'd have to admit you were in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was young, and I didn't know, and yeah.
And it all comes so easy so far.
There'll
be another opportunity.
Yeah, right.
No big deal.
No, I just didn't at the time. It was like I don't want that direction. But, later on I thought, God, that was really not a good decision. Anyway, so then I did get a job working for a producer that had a deal, I think, with a company associated with Warner Brothers doing movie stuff. And at that point, I read a ton of scripts. I met, I was doing the thing, was a development person, meeting all these people. It was a really fun job. I met amazing people I'm still friends with. But ultimately, I thought, I've read enough scripts. I might as well write one, and I became very friendly with a woman I was working with who was a development executive, and we had really similar taste. I just wrote a script, and she read it, and she said, well, this is really kind of interesting, you should keep doing it. So I kept doing it, and then...
Kept doing that script or wrote other scripts?
I did that script. It was like, really my first script, and it was not at all a Hollywood script. It was high concept. Mm-hmm. I really like doing original ideas. I really like doing things I haven't done before. And this one was called Too Smart for Love, and it was about a really smart kind of repressed young woman who's in college, and she gets off because there were ride boards, and she gets a ride with somebody. And so she's like a computer nerd in the very early day of that. And she gets a ride and has this adventure with this guy who basically gives her a ride because she's really good with numbers, and he wants to pull a scam. But it's like, if you ever read the romance comics, it's like the romance comics. And the idea was to do like one of those old, like the Liechtenstein drawings, was to do like a romance comic, but to put action in it. So, it got me agents. Did
that ever get made?
No, but I still think it could get made because I think it's a cool idea. Because it's very I mean, you could just do it in this great kind of graphic-y way. I've thought about trying to do a graphic novel of it. It's fun.
Oh, there's an idea.
Yeah. So from there, I had like all these ideas because I think my parents always talked about ideas at dinner.
Yeah.
I just come up with...
So you weren't afraid of it?
Yeah, I have ideas all the time. Other people are great at other things. I have a lot of ideas. I always have ideas.
So were you still in the development job?
At that point, no. When I started writing it, yes, but no. Then I just kept... The guy who was the producer decided not to be a producer, or his deal ended or something. So I was sort of looking for another job, but I was sort of writing, and I decided I was going to write or do it for a little while. And then I had these deals to maybe here's a TV idea, here's this idea. A lot of them were drama. Some of them were comedy. But the one that was a comedy, somebody said, well, why don't we try and sell it as a screenplay? And I said, okay. So we sold it to Paramount as a screenplay idea. And suddenly, having written really one screenplay, I had to write a screenplay, which was terrifying. And I don't really, and I think probably I'm more naturally a non-comedy writer, but that's just what I got the job in.
So you pitched the idea, and then they said, yes, write the script?
Yeah, but in those days, when you pitched it, first of all, there were movie deals. Second of all, you didn't have to work everything out. So you just pitched, and it was a high concept idea. They said, sure, do a draft, and then and then the deals were different then too.
Right.
So then it got real, and I had to do it. And so I wrote it, and then Paramount liked it, but there was something similar. But I did another draft, and they really liked it, but they had to decide between like 2 or 3 projects. And it was a long time ago, and it was I think it was like Flashdance 2 or Footloose. It was maybe a little later, but there was something that competed with it. My agent then called and said, so here's a really good news. There's somebody else wants to do it, and they want to do it because they bought the song title, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and they wanted to go with the song title. And I said, no, I really like my title. It's As in Dance. And they said, well, this is, and a lot of people said, no, it's a really good idea. I really loved the song.
Yeah.
I just thought, and I understood that it went with the song, but I didn't. Anyway, so they ended up.
You didn't win that battle.
When you do a development deal, you sell it.
Yeah.
I didn't own it anymore. That became Girls Just Want to Have Fun. They cut a bunch of the characters out, but they had to. It was much cheaper, so it was much smaller than it had been. And
so then you were on your way.
Yeah, I was sort of on my way, but I was just been ambivalent all along, which is unfortunate. But I love writing and ideas. Yeah, and then I had a couple other deals, and then somebody wanted me to write a dramatic thing, so I wrote a dramatic thing, and most things don't get made. So, it's not like they get made, but I did a bunch of stuff. And then a few years later, we just had some medical issues in our family, so I really needed to get a job, and I was sort of working on things and writing on things and having some jobs and having some specs, but somebody said, would you be interested, because of you'd write teenage girls, would you be interested in working on this show? It's not on the air, and it's a TV show, and it's about kids growing up. And I said, well, I have a 2-year-old, and I can't work on a TV show, so it would have to be that I wouldn't have to work full time. And also, it was very different working on TV shows in those days. It was very male. And
I don't know if it's all that different.
You can pick. There's a lot of shows now. So, yeah, and it was just it was just sort of a very different time for that. But anyway, so I looked at the pilot, and it turned out that one of the moms in My Mommy and Me with my daughter was the mom in the pilot. And I said, this is so weird. I might do this. And so I said, I'll do it, but I'll do it for 6 months. Uh-huh. And so I did it. I was like the executive story editor. They gave me that job, even though I'd never done TV. I wrote a bunch of the scripts, and it became Beverly Hills 90210. So I did that.
Yes. Thank you.
I created the Peach Pit. So I did that. And then the guy who created it created Melrose Place, and I helped him with that. So I did that also.
Oh, those were my 2 favorite shows.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have some questions about those. So did you negotiate so you didn't have to be in the writer's room?
No, I was in the writer's room, which was great. I turned out I really liked being in the writer's room. It was really fun. And I wrote one of the 90210s I wrote with Darren, this guy who created it. I became really good friends with him. And I thought that part was really fun because I love ideas. So with that part, and particularly on 90210, it was a good group. It was fun to do it.
Were you the only woman in the room?
In 90210, yeah. Wait, was I the only woman? Yeah, in the room. Mm-hmm. There were like a group of very eclectic people, a playwright, a novelist, it was a bunch of different people. And so it was fun for them. It was just sort of fun and lively. I just sort of, and then I could leave. I could write my scripts at home, but I would show up for the in-the-room stuff, yeah.
Okay, so it was manageable with your 2-year-old.
It was manageable. And then I did, with Melrose Place, that I, was pregnant again. And that was just a different experience as a TV show. The energy was a little different. There were some great people that I'd met. There were 2 women that became showrunners since then that were fabulous on the show. And there was another woman. There were some great people on it. It was just a different energy because with 90210, we could do whatever we wanted because no one paid any attention to us because it was new. I don't know. They just never. There was another show we were competing against that was going to do better. There were no expectations.
Do you remember what it was?
No, but it didn't stay on the air. I do know that. I know. People didn't expect the show to do anything. People paid no attention, so we had very little oversight for a long time.
It felt like a big hit to me. Was it actually a big hit?
It became a big hit. Yeah, and the first year was great. It became like a trendsetter, and it was really surprising. Though people were surprised. So by the time Melrose Place came along, it was a little more. There was just more control, and they wanted to make it into a soap opera more. That was great for what they wanted, but for me, I kind of wanted to have women in more positive role models and getting in fights with each other.
They were all backstabbing and throwing each other in the pool.
A lot of them were, yeah. So that was just, it was a choice. At that point, I had a little daughter. it was just sort of, I thought a lot of it was great. I thought the idea of it was great. A lot of the people were great, and it was fun. But
it's a departure from I'm going to do socially conscious documentaries.
It's a departure from that. And then the other thing is, by that point, my younger daughter her uncle gave her this like really early one of those massive Mac, what were they called? The iMac, I don't know, those colorful Macs,
Oh, yeah.
And she was on it. And she was doing all these stories, and I could not find anything for her, anything. And I just like to do different stuff. And so I met a woman who I was sort of thought, I think it would be interesting to learn, to try to figure out how to do one of these things, like to do 90210 meets Nancy Drew on a computer. It would be fun to try and figure out computer stuff for girls. So I just started fiddling with that, and I met some people, and I met a woman who is a therapist but was interested in doing this, and she and I came up with this sort of kids CD-ROM idea, and we sold it, and that was fun. It was like a cute little story. It was animated, and it was a way to teach kids, but it had a story, so it was like a mystery. And it was very simple in a lot of ways, but it was doing a lot of early interactive stuff. And then I think we did a couple more things, or I did a couple more things, and then we moved. My husband got this opportunity, and we moved up north. And I was writing scripts, too. I wrote something for the woman who produced Friday. I wrote a pilot. I wrote something for Disney. But I was also doing this other sort of interactive stuff. And when I moved to Marin, I thought, isn't someone doing convergence? Like the idea of, I'm sitting there, I had an early laptop, I have the TV on, I'm on, my phone,
You're doing it all at the same time?
Pretty much, like people do now. Yeah. And I thought, it would be really interesting to come up with something. But my ideas are way early usually. So
in 20 years, people are going to be all over this.
I know, exactly. So I wrote a letter. It was like Craigslist. There was some job thing at Electronic Arts, and I wrote them. Electronic Arts was looking for, I don't know, an engineer or something. And so I wrote a letter saying, I'm not an engineer, but I'm really interested in convergence, and I cannot believe I can't find anyone up here who's interested in it, doing it.
Now explain
what it is.
Yeah.
It's called, now it's transmedia, I guess. Then it would have been like, my idea was, how do you tell a story using everything? So it's like what they did with Lost. Anyway, so there was this guy who emailed me back, and his name was Ralph Guggenheim, and he had been one of the co-founders of Pixar. I hadn't known him. He was a producer on Toy Story, and he and this guy Neil Young, who not the singer but is a well-known game guy, were developing this story called Majestic, which they called a Beyond the Internet project. And the idea was tell a story using people. You think you're playing a game on one of the Electronic Arts games, and it turns out you get caught. The developers are characters. They introduce the game to you, and then you're in it with them because they're the shadow government. And so it's a game, it's a story. You have to solve puzzles. People got faxes. You would dial in. There was instant messaging, early form of it. There was all this stuff, and it won awards. And so that was an amazing experience. I love that. I was like the writer consultant helping Arc at like a TV series.
So it's everywhere. You'd be on your computer, then you'd get a fax in your fax machine.
Yeah,
it's all tied together.
Opt in. Yeah, and but the problem is it was conspiratorial, so that there's a bomb at your door and things like that. Well, the problem is 9/11 happened. So after 9/11, it was problematic.
Then we can't joke about all these things anymore. No one really wants to go through that.
No, and so but it was such a great thing. It was so ahead of its time. So because of that, other people were interested in it. Like I did a one-day thing where I helped the guy from 9 Inch Nails. He had liked the game. And I did something for Procter & Gamble from their TV thing to do, which I'm working on now too, is to do, something that's sort of a TV show with an interactive piece. But I early on developed it for them. And I think it's really, it's an interesting way to do some of the stuff for the future. Lost did do it.
How did Lost do it? Because I watched that like a crazy person. But
you
was
didn't
there
go on their online thing? I don't know, because I wasn't a Lost person particularly, but I know they had that piece, and everyone said it was very, very similar to Majestic.
Oh, I do remember there was a web piece to it, and people would try to figure out the puzzle.
Yeah. Huh. And so I didn't do that, but I heard about that. Anyway, we moved back to LA. I wrote some more screenplays, but things it just got harder and harder to get things made. It just wasn't like that. Oh, and then there was the writer's strike, and I got a job working on as a non-writing executive producer on it was a project called Take 180, and it was a startup, and it was Disney funded. But it was participatory webisodes, so the writers were all YouTube writers, and they would do these little things that we would cast, and they would write, and I would supervise as a non-writing, because executive producer.
Certainly wasn't a guild position.
No, it certainly wasn't, and it was and so, I mean, we cast it with Alison Brie, we cast it with great people, and they ended up playing on ABC Family. It was great, and then Disney bought it. And so that was great for, financially, because people had shares.
Sure.
But, then it became like a marketing thing for Disney.
Yeah.
It just wasn't the same. Because, again, it was at the beginning, it was so fun. There was so much freedom. So that was really fun to do. I thought that was really fascinating. And the idea was using, people are doing a lot of it now, but it was like using fan stuff. People would, teen girls mostly would write in their stories. And they would have suggestions like, what's the, tell us about your fight with your girlfriend, and how did you meet your best friend, or what was your, prom like, or what was the time you snuck out of school like, and everybody would write their stories or video them, but they really, writing their stories instead, they really got into it.
So they would write the stories, and then would you film them?
There would be a vote. Everybody, all the people on the site would vote. And the winner got incorporated into the winner's story got incorporated and acted, and the writers
how fun.
Would write it, and the people would act it out. So yeah, it was cute.
Great.
So it was really fun, and it was.
And how thrilling for the people who get picked, and then it's on TV.
Yeah, it was really, really fun, and it was great until when Disney bought it. It was what it was. It's fine. So I loved that too, and I thought, I really like this collaborative thing now. Anyway, and then I heard at the end of that Girls Just Want to Have Fun was getting remade, and I wasn't going to write it or anything, but I met with the producer. Miley Cyrus was cast. I think it was Lakeshore and Fox. It seemed like, it was a good idea and everything. Like the Miley Cyrus, it just sort of timing didn't work out. So it's on hold, but I think it'll get remade. It just won't get remade with Miley Cyrus because she's too old. I think it'll get remade with, a new Disney person that comes along, who's next, or something. I don't know what, I have to call them and see what's going on with it. But when I thought it was getting remade, I had this other idea that was, it's like it's not really Girls Just Want to Have Fun at all. But I had been, the other thing I'd been doing is I'd started writing more dramatic stuff and learning about that because of the things I did for electronic arts was more dramatic, and I liked writing thrillers. I love writing, so I optioned a thriller, and I started writing that. It was really, really fun to. I like writing that stuff, and that's more what my parents did. I think it's probably, frankly, more natural to me. Anyway, I wrote this other thing about it that I was going to write as a book because I've always wanted to write a novel, and so my girlfriend, who was sort of my story editor, my story muse, said, "Oh yeah, why don't you try and write? This would be a good movie." And I said, I don't know. And she said, yeah, we could try to do it as an independent movie. I said, okay. And I said, but I really want to write a book. And she said, no, just, I think you should be good timing to do it because if the movie's going to come out, it's a similar thing. So I've written it, but then...
You wrote the movie or you wrote the book?
I wrote the screenplay draft for the movie, but then the producer that I worked with sadly died.
Oh.
So that was hard. But I'm right now thinking about either doing it that way, and a producer's interested in doing it as a TV series, which would be great. But anyway, it's about a helicopter mom.
Yes.
And it's like someone like me, kind of, but maybe a little more intrusive. But I took like a break after my friend died, because that was hard. And so then, so I did start working. I've been working on a novel, and I'm almost done with it to show it.
Oh, good.
And so that's what I've been doing mostly. And then the other thing I've been doing, which is a big piece, is I've taught screenwriting, and I do teach screenwriting to veterans through the Writers Guild. There's a mentor program.
Oh, I've heard about this program.
Yeah, it's a great program. But I also really liked meditating, and when I moved to Marin, I got more interested in doing, there's a whole way you do it in a group situation. It's become like people know about mindfulness and everything. So I just got interested in it, and I just thought I want to do a little bit more giving back, and I want to do something more immediate also, because when I grew up, my sister was born a year ahead of me, or 13 months ahead of me, was born with brain damage. So it was a huge thing for me growing up. And so she died when I was 40, and after that I don't know, I was motivated to really want to kind of find ways to work with people like her, or because she had gone through a lot of periods of mental illness and homelessness and all kinds of issues. And so I thought I could combine teaching writing and using mindfulness as sort of a self-expressive thing for people who have had trauma, for girls particularly, to find their voice. Because this is this part of me that always wanted to do good, coming out again. And so I learned, I was trained to teach mindfulness. I developed a mindful writing program, and I've been doing it for about 3 or 4 years now. I do it at USC. It's sort of, I do the hero's journey. It's good, by the way, for writers. It's good for people with writer's block. And it's also for me, who really believes in the value of an idea and being authentic to your voice rather than just copying people. And people that really break through in writing are people like that. So it's great for writer's block. It's like dealing with doubt and self-judgment and all that. And so I do it for writers, but I also do it with homeless people with mental illness. I do it at the Downtown Women's Center, and I do some day-longs. So I've enjoyed developing that because I've made it up.
Yeah. So how do you link the two? How do you teach a mindfulness writing class that's different from a mindfulness class or a writing class?
Well, yeah, okay. It's not that different. I'll find out what the person wants to say, and I'll say, I know how to edit. I could be a story editor, so I can try and figure out what they want to say, what their voice is, and I'll help them get there.
Here's your holes. Here's where you went in the wrong
direction.
direction.
And I'll say, your structure, but look at your Act 3, but look at your Act 2. When I teach, it depends where. If I teach mindful writing, I'm doing a day long at UCLA. If I do it there, and it's my first time doing it, then it will be, okay, so, you want to get your script in really good shape, or your book, and here's how you do it. When I do it as a mindfulness thing, it's all the practice, it's the experience of it. We're all, the journey is, everyone has this, every experience is a journey. There's no right way or wrong way. And a good way to describe it would be, and I would do this for both. You're talking about character. How do you create a good character? How do you create your hero and your so-called villain? You have to think of both. And I said this to the people at the Writers Guild, the veterans also. So it's like a buddy story in a funny way. And so the antagonist and the protagonist need to relate to each other, because the antagonist is the shadow self of the protagonist, and everybody has their villain in them. And it's as much an internal journey of overcoming it in yourself as it is an external journey of having a person who's the so-called villain. So when you see a movie where the villain's like a cardboard villain, at least for me, it's really boring. But when I see an interesting villain, there's nothing better.
Yeah.
And they'll either, you'll have a good character go villainy, or you'll have a bad character go good. But that journey's really, really interesting. I mean, Michael Corleone so there's a million examples. When Denzel Washington plays people, that are kind of villains, is fantastic. He's a great villain. because he gives them such a great texture. So I will do a meditation. I'll talk a lot about literature. I'll talk about what the role of character. I'll talk about that, and I'll throw enough in about quotes and about what makes different characters and all the different ways you can come up with biographies when you're doing your character. And I said, and then another way is, you can think about, if you think about your character, write a compassionate biography of your villain. Or write about their childhood, what happened to them in their childhood.
What made them the way they are.
Yeah, just talk about their childhood. So then therefore that character will have some depth, and you can use it all throughout. So that's like an example of what I would do.
And then do you do a meditation exercise?
I did that one, yeah, every time there'll be a meditation. So that one would be, just because it works with it, as either some kind of like a kind awareness or a loving kindness meditation, yeah. But I tailor the meditation to go with the writing. So it's kind of writing infused, and it's usually filled with part of it is filled with fear of writing or trust in your instinct. There's a whole thing about trusting your instinct when you're writing, and write a fast, which everyone says, write a fast first draft. Don't
get
question
it out, don't judge it.
Yeah, because you don't have any perspective. And if you stop, it's hard to finish. You get paralyzed, or you worry about what everybody's going to say. And it's great to have an inner voice, the voice that works. One of the reasons Handmaid's Tale works so well, she had a point of view, she had a voice. Series like Breaking Bad, like The Sopranos, like Mad Men, they got to do what they wanted to do. If there were too many people interfering at that early stage, it would have been muddled.
Right.
I think at that point. So
you have to be really brave.
Yeah, and I'm really a people pleaser, so it's hard for me because I do want to please everybody, and so it's just my personality. So it's hard because you're hearing what everyone else says, and I think that it's hard because you'll have meetings and people will say, "Oh, listen, I really want this," and then you'll come back and you'll have just really killed yourself to do it, and they won't even remember they said it.
Right.
So it's not worth it.
They don't know.
No, it's worth it. I mean, sometimes. So you just have to keep trying and do it the way you do it. But I find the mindful writing thing interesting because it's a more pleasant way to write.
Yeah.
And it's not that different. It just gives you a little more faith in yourself.
Because it sounds like somehow you've removed the torture bit of it.
Yeah, you can remove the torture. It goes away for a while. Like this, the state where you get in, when you're writing, it can usually be late at night where you get in this flow, and it's like, oh my God. Like I remember on the first 90210 I wrote, it was probably about 1 a.m, and I was writing it, and I just had this idea. And I thought, I'm going to put this in the scene about Trump Doy, and and I wrote it. And I'd never even written a TV script, and that was like the part of it that was like, people came up and said, that was such a great thing. I said, yeah, I don't even know where that came from. It's like you can get there to those moments easy. And it doesn't even have to be, if you meditate, it's just getting yourself in a place where you get rid of the judgments. You're not editing while you're writing.
Because when you're in that place, you are kind of in a meditative place.
Yeah, you can be in that, and when you're performing like as a musician, or when you're
in the zone.
Yeah, and if you hear Ellen DeGeneres talks about, there was some famous thing, her first thing, which I forget what it was, Dear God or something that she wrote. It just happened.
Yeah.
And then Dylan talks about songs that wrote themselves.
It's a little channeling, isn't it?
It's I don't know, maybe it's like I think it might be just channeling what mindfulness people would say, it's just channeling your inner wisdom, your flow, your intuition. Just getting in touch with letting whatever's in you come out.
Yeah. I think everyone knows that same space where you lose track of time and it's just flowing. And
totally.
Whether it's music or writing or acting or whatever it is.
That's right. It's like any of those things. And I even think it's probably one of the reasons, I've come up with a lot of ideas driving. I've come up with a lot of ideas swimming. And I've come up with a lot of ideas meditating if I'm not trying to come up with ideas. And I think it's this thing of emptying your mind. I just think you need to empty your mind somehow.
So some people run.
Yeah, running does it too. Basketball. I think you can do it with knitting. I think you can do it with needlepoint.
Candy Crush.
Yeah, probably cards, probably mahjong. I don't know. I think you can do it with a lot of different things. And Yeah.
So if you're stuck, you should stop fighting it and go take a walk.
You should go take a walk. I mean, you go take a walk, you meditate, you swim, you just get away from it.
Yeah.
I think with the mindful writing classes I do, it's like write fast, don't edit, just go, go, go. And if you can't, you can say, like, I don't know what I'm writing. That's fine. I don't care. But then you'll be writing.
Who doesn't have pages and pages of that?
Yeah. And then I said, and then you'll be writing.
Yeah.
It's just people have no perspective, or a lot of people have no perspective when you're writing how it is. Mm-hmm. And I'll read things, and I've had so many people say they have this experience where if I'm going through my files and I'll pull something out because I'm trying to clean out my files, and I'll say, who wrote that? It's pretty good. And it, not always. It'll be someone else a lot. But once in a while, it would be me. And I remember back at the time thinking, it's not any good, So you don't know.
Totally. That happened to me a couple weeks ago. I wrote a blog post, and it really was, I was having an argument with someone in my head, and I said, let me just write it down so I can forget about it. It took me 5 minutes. I forgot about it. I found it the other day. I was like, oh, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a very different, it's just a different way to look at it. I mean, a friend of mine who's a writer and a director, he has the thing where it's like, I guess it's more like you have your writer's hat, you have your editor's hat, and you have your seller's hat. Mm. And those are very different. Very, very different. And they're different stages.
Yeah.
So you just have to kind of write it and get it out there and then kind of see what you have. And
you can't be doing it all at the same time.
No.
So do you think there's a book in you about this method you've come up with?
Yeah, I do. I think I would like to do, or an article, because I think particularly doing it with traumatized people is something, it's such a great tool. And it really, when I do it with these groups, I see a transformation in an hour from these people feeling scared, just looking for shelter for an hour, a place to be in a room and be safe. And by the end of the hour, it's like a writing group. And
they feel like a person again.
Yeah, they're sharing their stories. They have amazing stories. They write beautiful. A lot of them write beautifully. They just feel like they have an identity at the end. They feel listened to. Mm-hmm. They've bonded. They make connections with each other, and I think it's really a very quick way to help to really reach people and give them a sense of hope of future.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that population are artists.
They are. Well, some of them are. A lot of them became homeless. I mean, I wouldn't say by choice, but through kind of genetics, mm-hmm. and genetics leading to complicated childhoods because their families had issues or had mental health issues. And for whatever reason, it was easier for them. They call it, some people call it home free. And when they do finally get sick of being homeless, or some of them are sick of it from the beginning, but some aren't. And when they finally get housed, because some of the people in my groups have recently gotten housed, for some of them it's really, really difficult. Because it's almost like having vet PTSD. They're so adrenalized from being on the beach that they're scared. They don't want to some of them don't want to go down to their mailboxes. So when there have been groups, we've started groups where you would actually help deal with adjusting to being housed.
Isn't that interesting?
And some of them, if you don't, it's like the first 6 months, or if you're, some of them just don't make it.
Because we would think it would be such a relief.
I know.
But it's the opposite.
For some of them. Some of them it is a relief.
So tell me what you make of where we are in the world right now, which is a big question. Specifically, women in Hollywood.
Oh,
Here we are 2 weeks after
the stuff.
Me Too hashtag.
Yeah, I've thought about that. I mean, I think that one of the things that is great, and this really made me think about wanting to do TV now, because I love collaborating and I love a lot of the shows, and I love that the shows so many of them have women.
Mm-hmm. Oh, TV is so good right now.
Yeah, and there's so many women involved in it, and so many friends of mine, and so I think it could be really fun, because I think there's nothing more fun than sitting and fiddling around with ideas and stuff like that. So I am talking to people like that, so I think it's much better that way. But, I think like everyone, all the Me Too stuff, it's certainly, having been there for a long time, I just think it's pervasive across a lot of different businesses. And I think the level that it's being talked about, I mean, Harvey Weinstein is a big, extreme example, but there was a lot of lesser versions of that that are very insidious and that really can get in the way of careers. And we all have our stories. I think like one of the things when I started out, I remember that if you would have meetings with certain producers, certain ones, you would just know going in what to expect, and you would protect yourself, or you wouldn't have the meeting, or you'd be in a, you'd make sure to sit in like far away or things like that. There was just
because women would tell each other.
Yes. I mean, there was sort of people would say, "Oh yeah,
watch out for that.
Watch out for that. This will, blah blah happened to me. So don't get, you have to sit near the door, or whatever it would be. Yes, there was. I mean, certainly not everyone, not every producer by any stretch, but there was that. And when you're a young person starting out, there's a lot of it's not always this as obvious as the Harvey Weinstein stuff seems to be. It can be a lot more subtle, and it's not like, oh, it's a casting couch, but there is there's this sort of sexual subtext in there that kind of is right there from the beginning. For me, frankly, I would just like avoid the situation or not proceed, because I just didn't want to have to deal with that. And I just didn't really learn how to deal with that in my life. I didn't know, how you navigate that. There was no sexual harassment, like classes. There was no one to turn to if it happened.
Yeah, that's all fairly new, and it's funny to remember that.
It wasn't.
We didn't have a name for it till Anita Hill.
No, and we didn't even have. Even after Anita Hill, there were not places at work that you really could go to talk about it if it happened.
Well, you can bet this week everyone's having their sexual harassment meeting. Everyone's having a refresher right now.
But now you have to take these classes. I mean, so no, there was no one. If you were going to complain, the women that complained in the 90s were the ones I know about were blacklisted. Then what do you do? Or you don't even know if you're going to win. So it really was different. I think it probably comes with politics, like it comes with all kinds of things, It's all over. I think it's just part of the way it's been. But I think that there's really much more discussion that needs to be had of the subtle parts of it and how you have to navigate to avoid it. And career options that you have to you don't go for because it's built into it. I don't think it's as true now. And I think progress has been made, and I think that this is all coming forward. The people that are telling their stories are so brave, and it's way obviously about time. And I guess there does need to be accountability, and there needs to be a safe way to report it. So I think it's really important. I'm very, very happy about it.
Does this moment feel different to you?
Yes, I think it does, because I haven't seen consequences before. So I think women have more support now with each other. I think that, yes, it being more talked about. And the weird code that you couldn't talk about it, and that was such a strange piece of it, that it was so hard. And I think one of the fascinating things going on now is people think about it, and a lot of my girlfriends, writer friends, producer friends, whatever, even friends in other businesses, would say, God, I haven't thought about this, but 20 years ago this happened. And I have tons of those. I mean, just when I was, when you're starting out, oh yeah, this happened, I didn't really think about it, but yeah, I sure didn't call that person back. Oh yeah, I did that, yeah.
And now they're all coming up, and you're like, oh my God, all these things I've forgotten about.
Yeah, that it was like, you just sort of feel like it just kind of, and so now if you work with women, more women anyway, I worked with a lot of great guys. But if you work with more, but the fact that there are more women, it's a buffer on it. It's a different experience.
And it feels like we're going to talk about it differently. Like, I think it may be easy, I don't know, I hope. It may be easier for a woman in a situation where something happens, where she can say, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Whereas maybe we wouldn't have 10, 20 years ago.
Or the thing even about teachers, Of course, it's a power thing. Yes, of course it's wrong. But when I was growing up and when I was in college even, it was like, yeah, you weren't supposed to, but boy, it was all over the place. It was like...
There was a teacher at my high school.
Yeah.
They just moved him to a different school.
Yeah, that's like the priests.
The priests.
I know. No, same with my high school. And I don't even know if he got moved. But in college, it was like, no, it was just like nothing happened. There was no consequences now. And it's just such a different, it's still there, but it's not there as much. Do you think it'll make a difference?
This feels different to me.
Yeah.
I've given up on we're not going to solve gender inequality in my lifetime. I accept that.
Yeah.
We're going to push the boulder up the hill as far as we can. But this feels different. And there are, you can already see the backlash. Like Kevin Spacey tweeted this morning, and now House of Cards is canceled.
Yeah, I think there's that. And I think Mark Halpern, the guy at NBC, he's a journalist. It's that journalist world. But that's... that's another version of it. But
we haven't begun to hear the end of the stories.
I know stories about a lot of people that haven't come out yet.
Oh yeah,
and maybe they will, and maybe they won't.
It feels
I'm
like
not really that into. I'm not really into outing, but I am into it not happening again.
Yes, can we all just behave better, please?
Yeah, if people want to, I say more power to them. I was not. Nothing happened to me like with the Harvey Weinstein thing.
Yeah,
so I think that might be brutal. That I might feel very differently. Yes, of course, and that's. I can't, particularly the first person that came forward, because it's such a hard thing to do. And my husband goes, oh, so many of these guys knew about this, or I'm like, I don't know, it's this world, it's like being in a fraternity. I don't excuse it at all, but it's this behavior, this sort of bad behavior. It's like why so many bosses in Hollywood become screamers. Some of them probably... If they hadn't gone through, agent training programs where they were screamed at for years, they might not have become screamers.
Right.
It's like having an abusive parent.
Yeah, you shit on the PAs, and then when the PA grows up, they shit on the next.
Yeah, and it's almost like that's how you join. That's Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, it's
Lord of the Flies, and so some of it I do think is that, although I don't think everyone does that. But I think the culture has to change with that, so that it's not all. Sure. It's a little more civilized. My younger daughter was the co-sports editor of her college newspaper, and so she and her other editor was also, or chair, was a young woman also, and it's very unusual to have two women do it. So they cleared all the whatever out of that office, and like they started saying, we're going to Swift, and we're going to play rom-coms, and we're going to... And it was so funny. They were like feminized the whole thing.
They just changed the culture.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need, more women in the room.
Yeah.
Change it.
Yeah. More women in the room, obviously a woman in the White House.
Obviously,
and women in these jobs, obviously role modeling and all that stuff. But just that... I think the girls' show that's a great thing because everyone doesn't look, a certain way. And I love when shows get cast that way. I think that's hugely important. Yeah,
because we have some real people.
Well, I think women obviously need to be allowed to look real. Mm-hmm. And I think that's men are allowed to look real.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, I don't understand. I kind of understand. I understand it, but I think it's if you show it in the culture other ways, it will change the culture. And I think that's a really, really important thing to do also. And a lot of that is casting too, and putting people that look real in some of these shows. And there's more of that going on. There's another show, I was just trying to think of which one it was, where everyone looks, one of the things I like about it is everyone looks normal. Yeah. They don't look like movie stars or anything like that, or they don't look glamorous. And I think that's a really good approach. And I just,
Office.
Yeah, I can't think of the show I was thinking of, but I will think of it. So I think that I think about this a lot because it is really important. And, it was like the Women's March. There's, in numbers, if enough people do it, I do think that this, Me Too thing was really, really powerful.
Yes.
And I think that's great how that started. Yeah, I think that once there's a way to really register things in a safe way, it will change it a lot.
Yeah. What advice do you have for young women just starting out?
I'm going to think about that. I have practical advice. I have advice I know would be smart in the film business. To be smart in the film business is find a genre you like to do and stay with it. I happen to like to do all kinds of things, and so I want to always do a bunch of different things, but I think it's easier for people to know what you do if you find what you really like.
So you think it's better to specialize?
I think it's better. I don't think TV film matters. I think like comedy, family, drama, thriller, horror, I think it matters. I think it's easier to move forward that way.
So people know what box to put you in?
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to do. Now they have a lot of these fellowships, I think, for people starting out. It's good to apply for those. And you meet people. And you meet people in all of those types of things, and even extension classes, anywhere where you're going to meet people and get feedback. And write a ton. Take the time to learn, take the time to break scripts down, and really write what you want to write. Absolutely don't be scared to be unique or have your own voice, because that will stand out. And another thing is that when people are casting shows, not casting shows, but looking for writers for shows, a lot of times they'll hire people not from screenplays. They'll hire people from plays. They'll hire people from graphic novels. In a funny way, it makes you stand out more. So don't feel that by doing that you're diminishing your chances. They can see if they like having existing material, and if it's material that they really can't, they think might make a good show, but they can't tell, it's sort of safer in a way. Because you read a million scripts, they all sort of kind of they get similar after a while. So a lot of times, particularly for an idea, if they're buying an idea, it doesn't matter what the form is. If they're buying you to be on a staff of a show, you should have a script, but it also doesn't hurt at all to have an original piece of material that's different.
So it's your uniqueness.
That you're unique, that they're going to read it and say, wow, this is interesting. I judge for the Writers Guild their drama stuff. So I just read a script, and I won't say what it was, but it stood out. It was so interesting. I kept reading it. It kind of took me along. It explained it, even though I wasn't that familiar with the series. And I just loved how unpredictable it was. I liked it a lot. And I think because I had read about 5 that were not that way. So I think that everything can become a cliche and a pattern, and so I wouldn't try to copy what's been done.
Would you say you don't have to follow the rules or know what they are so you can
I think
veer
that,
off them?
yeah, you have to know what the rules are. You know the rules. You have to know the rules of writing. You have to know, this is what I'll tell people in a class. You have to know, I know my ending usually. I may not know it exactly, but I know it. I know I'm a high concept person. I'll just get an idea. Like I'll say, I said this idea. I think it would be a really good, interesting thing. If I like an idea, I'll always like it. It never goes away. So you can give it the test of time. The way it works now, you really do have to work everything out before you write. I like to kind of work it out. I like to find out some of it, to leave some of it I learn as I go. So then that's for the second draft to really get into that. But I think like as Doctorow, and there's someone else who said this, some other version of it where, you have guideposts and that you follow them. And, and you have your headlights and you can only see as far as your headlights, but it takes you the next thing, or you go from hill to hill. But basically you don't, it's a journey. It's a journey, and in writing, especially your first draft, you're going to find out a lot of what you want to say, and then you kind of go back. You should make an outline of some sort, however you want to make an outline for yourself, and kind of know your big points you're going, like from here to here to here to here. You don't have to...
So you know where you're headed.
You have to know where you're headed. You have to know I'm going from A to B. This is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. And you should know that for your beats for the story. Within writing the beats, you can play with it. And I think it's easier to write that way. And I think it can take longer the other way. So, yeah. I think that is certainly what, if you're on a show, you'll have to do a beat sheet. You may have to do an outline, and everything gets worked out in advance. So there's real advantages. And that's easier to do on a TV show because it's much easier to work it out if you're working it out with someone else.
Yeah.
Because when you're working it out yourself, then you're in your own head, and it can be a very confusing place to be. But if you're on a show or you have a partner, I've only written one script my first one, and then the one I wrote for 90210 I wrote with Darren Star, and that was really fun. But because it was just fun to do with someone. Or I've collaborated on ideas with people, and I like it a lot.
You say, what if this happens? And then what if that happens?
Oh, it's just fun, and then you're in it together. And if I were doing, and I think it was, I've seen my friends who are women who have women partners, and it's just, it gives you a lot of strength.
You're not second-guessing yourself.
Oh, we love the idea. Oh, okay, no, what'd they say? Okay, well, we can do this, or what about this? Yeah, it's great. And then you're not, oh, but what about that? It's sort of just, you've decided together, so you don't go ruminating on it. So I think it's helpful to have that, and I think that's a great thing about working with people. It just sort of, because you can also, there can be a million. There's no right way. So I think that you could just sort of settle on a way and keep going and push through it. That's what I would say. And yeah, I think if you want to really do something, if you have an interest in being a writer-director, put something up there, figure out something you want to write that's inexpensive, and that, for instance, the guy that did Tangerine in that new movie that's fantastic, The Florida Project. Have you seen that? It's great. But he did Tangerine all on an iPhone. His stuff is really unique. Figure out something that you could shoot on an iPhone, or the concept makes it work that way. Yeah. Just try and do something where you can get it out there if that's what you want to do, if you want to be a writer-director. If you want to just write, you just have to write. Also write, if you can, write what you know, write your experience, because that is also what makes you unique. So you can make it third person, you can disguise it, but you have to bring yourself into what you write. And research is really fun to do. And I guess those would be the things.
Okay. Are you a success?
That's a complicated question for me. I'm very hard on myself. I don't know. I think I'm becoming more comfortable with the fact that what I really like is figuring things out and making stuff work and making sort of whatever I want to write work, and that with my own process of it, So, yeah, I mean, I think in many ways the word success is a trigger word for me, like the word perfect or
because how do you know when you get there, right?
I just think there's no such thing. And also, by the way, James Campbell said, if we were perfect, what would there be to write about? People would be really boring. What is there? It would be like
Stepfords.
Yeah. I think I enjoy people, and I really like ideas, and I really like writing. Yeah.
Are you a badass?
What is a badass? God.
Yeah, that's the question. What does that sound like to you?
I think I really do actually like to have fun, and I think I am willing to make waves, and I certainly will speak up for what I believe in, and I am totally honest. So yeah, and I'm a really, really loyal, overly loyal person. And I don't do things because other people say I should do them. So yeah, in that way.
Okay, I'll take it. All right,
I
think we got it. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, A Herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Amy Spies for sharing her story. And special thanks to Kate McDougall for the editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbay, and now on YouTube. And please subscribe and leave a review wherever it is that you listen. And of course on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features, bios of our guests, and the merchandise. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter at Other50% and Instagram at Other50% Podcast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.